Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sonoran Desert of Tucson, Arizona. I was thinking about mixing up how I do my videos a little bit. I've seen a couple YouTube channels where somebody went for a walk and just shared their thoughts, kind of free association like, as they were going on their walk. And I thought that's kind of cool. I haven't done that before, so I'd like to invite my YouTube audience with me as I go through my morning hike here on the desert trails out near my house on a nice calm Saturday morning. One of the things I'd like to do this morning to start off the conversation, the month of October was a really rough month for our family for a couple of different reasons. So I just wanted to start off with a couple of acknowledgments. A couple weeks ago, my wife's father died at the age of 78. So he had a long-term battle with a terminal health condition for about 12 years. And for much of that time, he lived in our household. He lived in our house so that the family could provide him the additional amount of care that he required. So it wasn't a surprise. We had been preparing for that day as best we could, and that day finally came upon us a couple weeks ago. And the week or so leading up to his actual death was very, very rough on the family as we watched that process take its toll. As we were coming to grips with that, just a couple days later, we got a call in the middle of the night that my daughter, who is a freshman at the University of Northern Arizona University, I should say, up in Flagstaff, that she was taken by ambulance out of the lecture hall that she was in as a student, and she had an emergency health situation that required her to be in the ICU for a couple days. So we kind of had to short circuit the grieving process and drive up to Flagstaff, which is about a 5-hour drive from where I live in Tucson, to go help her through this admittedly scary situation. So during this time, there's a couple people that I wanted to really acknowledge as being very helpful and appreciated by myself and my family. When we first got the news about my daughter, my wife reached out to a family friend that happens to live in Flagstaff. Mindy is a rabbi, actually, in Flagstaff. And when we told her that our daughter needed help, she dropped everything that she was doing and she went to the hospital to be by our daughter's side until we could arrive there. And then once we got there, she continued to be a great source of comfort for us and practical help. And for that, I'm very, very indebted. So that growling noise you hear in the background, I live near Davis Mountain Air Force Base, and a lot of times in the mornings you'll have some of the aircraft doing exercises out over this area. So I apologize ahead of time if we have a kind of a noisy element here on occasion. So where was I? So Mindy, thank you very much for all the help that you were to my family in our time of need. That's very much appreciated. Also, when we arrived at the hospital, the Flagstaff Medical Center chaplain for the ICU, the gentleman's name was Tom, couldn't possibly have been any nicer than he was. Never asked us what our religious affiliation was there for practical help. He wanted to visit just to make sure that if there was anything that he could do to make our stay less stressful. He let us know about some resources that the hospital and the community surrounding the hospital up there had for families that were from out of town. So just not only did we feel welcome, he tried to eliminate as much stress as possible during the time that we were there. So for that, again, Chaplain Tom, I'm indebted to you for your kindness. Also, I would like to acknowledge that my daughter's professor, Whitney, whose class that my daughter was in when this event happened, the professor actually went to the hospital with my daughter and stayed at her bedside for several hours that first day and visited more than once in the week that she was there. So it seems to me that that's something that she really went above and beyond to make sure that my daughter was okay. And again, I appreciate that as well. To my friends Nathan and my friend Ron, I appreciate your concern and your support and words of encouragement during this difficult time. And of course, my family as well. They had reached out and wanted to be kept up to date with all the goings on. And again, I want to thank them for their support. Those of you in the YouTube community, I would also like to thank a fellow YouTuber that most of you probably know, Bridget from AZ. Bridget and I live in the same city, and I really want to thank you, Bridget, for reaching out and checking up to see how things were going throughout this ordeal, and I appreciate your words of encouragement and your friendship. It means a lot. I know that when we make some of these videos, we're talking about things that are theoretical, and then when things hit you in your life that are really grounded in reality, and sometimes they seem a little bit more real than you'd ever like them to be, that's when it's nice to know that you have support of friends of any persuasion. So again, to all of you that I just mentioned, and to any that I may have forgotten, I just want to take a moment to thank you very much for your support during what was probably one of the toughest periods of time that we've had to deal with. That being said, one of the things that I sometimes think about when I have some moments of solitude, like when I'm on my hike like I am this morning, I just think about how I responded to these events now versus how I may have responded to them back when I was an indoctrinated Jehovah's Witness. Now, I haven't been a witness for more than 15 years now, but it was the only thing that I knew. So until the time that I was in my early 30s, it's really, that was the primary way that I defined myself and how I saw myself. First and foremost, I was a witness before I was anything else. So it's taken many years of work and reflection to be able to make some peace with the person that I thought I was, or the person that I was being groomed to be, as opposed to who I authentically am. And it made me think of an old joke that I heard years ago. Now I'm in sales as a career, and there's an old sales joke. Maybe some of you that are in sales have heard this one before. It's about a star salesman that's coming home from a business trip, and he gets into an accident and dies. So next moment he knows, he's standing in a line at the pearly gates waiting to be admitted to heaven. And as he's waiting there, he hears this little voice in the background say, "Psst, hey buddy." And he turns around and he sees the devil. And he says, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "Have you ever considered going to hell?" And the guy was taken aback. He said, "No, I thought heaven was the place where you want to be." So the devil puts his arm around him and takes him right up to the pearly gates and says, "We have a gentleman here who would like to explore his options before committing to going to heaven." And so Peter says, "Well, my son, if that's something you'd like to do, that would be fine." And he says, "And if I don't like what I see down there, I can always just come back here, right? And I can still get into heaven?" And he says, "Yes, my son, that's true." He says, "Okay, well, I'll go check it out." So the devil takes this man down to hell. And when they get there, it's nothing like what he expected. There's a party going on, there's music, there's dancing, everybody's having a great time. There's food everywhere, everybody's got a cocktail and just really enjoying life, almost like they were at some type of beachside resort. And he's looking around really in shock, and he tells the devil, "This is nothing like what I thought." He says, this looks all right. I could do with spending eternity here." And the devil says, "It's always like this down here." So he says, well, let me go back to heaven and I'll check in and see what Peter has to say. So they go back up to heaven, and the man approaches Peter and says, well, here's the offer that I was given in hell. Can you match that? Do you have anything like that up here in heaven? To which Peter replied, no, my son, I'm sorry. We don't have anything like that here. He says, if that's the type of life that you want to live for eternity, well, I'm afraid you're going to have to go to hell. And so the man says, well, I always thought that heaven was where I wanted to be, but if you don't have anything to beat the devil's offer, I think I'm going to go to hell. So next thing you know, he's back in hell, except this time, when he appears in hell, he finds himself in front of a blast furnace, shackled to a sledgehammer, and the heat is unbearable. And he looks around, he's like, I must be in the wrong place. And he sees the devil walk by, and he calls him over and he says, hey, get over here. He says, I was just here 5 minutes ago. He says, there was a party going on. There was music. There was dancing. It was a great time. He says, I forewent going to heaven to come down here and look at what I'm dealing with now. And the devil stops and puts his arm around the man and says, 5 minutes ago, you were a prospect. Now you're a customer. So as a salesperson, I think some people in sales can see the humor in that story. But the reason I bring that up is because that is very much the type of situation that it's like dealing with the mindset of Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses. Because when you're a prospect, you're told all these amazing stories about the end is going to come anytime now. Literally, it could come today, it could come tomorrow. We're not saying that, but it could come very, very soon. We're closer than we've ever been. So therefore, you want to get right with God so you can enjoy no more sickness, no more death, no more pain, no more outcry. All of your problems, your financial problems, your health problems will be immediately done away with. There'll be no more war. Your dead loved ones will be raised from the dead, etc. And so that's very appealing on the surface. But it's not until you take them up on the offer and you invest hours and hours into studying the publications in order to come to an understanding of the Bible. You have to study their publications, not just the Bible. And so after you've invested all this time and you follow their program step by step by step of studying and then becoming an unbaptized publisher and then becoming a baptized publisher, and then perhaps if you're a man being a ministerial servant or elder, and once you've invested all this time in study and meeting attendance and field service, and you've given months and years and in some cases decades of your life, then you realize now that you're a customer that things aren't exactly the way that they were presented to you when you were still a prospect. And those of you that are watching this video that have been witnesses, perhaps your experience bears that out. Now, I'm sure that there are those of you that have a different experience, maybe those of you that have not been associated with the organization for a long period of time, and you're kind of still in that honeymoon phase, that you're talking to somebody who, you're talking to a witness who seems to have all the answers, and you're really enjoying your studies because you're learning things about the Bible that you never knew. You'd watch a video like this and say, well, here's an apostate who is just making lies. But I'm here to tell you, as are many people that are watching this video, that the longer you stay in, the more you realize that there are an abundance of lies. Now, I'm not out on the doorstep of a convention this morning trying to point out those lies. I'm trying to do things in my own way, in a way that's in keeping with my own approach and my own personality. And I respect very much those of you in the YouTube world that take a very aggressive stance. I think that takes a level of courage that, frankly, I don't believe that I possess. So those of you that are engaged in that type of work, my hat's off to you, because that cannot possibly be an easy thing to do. And I respect the fact that you're doing that. But when we're talking about lies, once you uncover the first lie in the teaching, in the belief system, it shakes you. It probably rattles you. And you can't help but thinking, well, if I was lied to about this topic, what else was I lied to about? And then you start doing your research, and you start doing research which is independent of just what the Watchtower says. And you start looking at other sources. You start looking deeper into some of the resources that the Watchtower has quoted, perhaps, in some of their articles. And then you realize, I wasn't told the full picture. I was only told part of the story. And on my own, when I researched the other part of the story, I can have a completely different conclusion to the one that I was thinking about. And some examples of that is the reason that this generation prophecy that was told through most of the 20th century, that this generation will by no means pass away until all these things occur. The reason that they had to change it is quite simply because it was a lie. It was a lie because the starting point from which that generation was calculated was 1914. Well, 1914 was a lie. That's why the generation passed away, because it was using a starting point that was not based on solid fact. The reason 1914 was a lie is because the biblical 2,520 years did not start in 607, because that's not when Jerusalem was destroyed. So if 607 is not accurate, therefore 1914 cannot be accurate. And if 1914 isn't accurate, the generation teaching, therefore, could not be accurate. So anybody, regardless of what age they were in 1914, if somebody in that generation was 1 day old or 15 years old, it doesn't matter, because they're using as a starting point of that promise something that's not built on fact. Now, you would never know that by looking at Watchtower literature only. The only way that you would discover that is by taking a look at other sources of information, historical, for an example, and getting a perspective other than just one perspective. Another thing that some people found, myself included, is that the name that we always gave such reference to, that name Jehovah, there's quite a bit of evidence to prove that that's not actually the name of God. Yes, the Tetragrammaton is in the Bible with those 4 Hebrew consonants, but as far as how it's pronounced, nobody today knows, and the witnesses admit that. So when Jeffrey Jackson gets on JW Broadcasting last year and says, do we use the name Jehovah because it's the most accurate? No. We use it because it's the most widely accepted pronunciation. Well, since when is wide acceptance of something a basis for practice on the part of witnesses? The cross is widely accepted as being a symbol of Christianity, but not according to Jehovah's Witnesses. Christmas or Easter is widely accepted to be a Christian ceremony or holiday, but it's not followed by witnesses or observed by witnesses. So if somebody's personal thoughts are that they don't want to observe Christmas or Easter, perfectly fine. If somebody wants to use a cross or not use a cross, that's perfectly fine. But the difference is there's something that's called a zero-sum game. And the concept of a zero-sum game is, in short, in order for me to win, somebody else has to lose. There's no such thing as a win-win. So an example of that is that there's a culture within the witnesses, and I think it's more of a human characteristic than a witness characteristic, because this culture has been around for a long time, that I am so willing to be on the winning side of an issue that I'm quick to point out any shortcomings on the losing side, and I have a little bit of Schadenfreude or joy when somebody who's on the side that's opposing me loses. So an example of that would be, for an example, I just watched a video within the last couple days on a channel called Ask a Jehovah's Witness, where, much like Bridget, he called a local Kingdom Hall, and he wanted to find out a little bit about why the New World Translation translated a particular phrase in the book of Revelation. And the person who answered the phone, obviously, you know, for them to be prepared to talk on that specific topic would be impossible. But one of the things that they said is, why are you nitpicking on this? Why are you nitpicking on this particular verse? You know, you're focusing too much on the details here. Can't you just look at the fact that overall the New World Translation is an accurate translation? And the person who was calling says, no, I'm not going to make that. I'm not going to make that assumption. He says, when I lay translation after translation after translation side by side, every other translation has this particular turn of phrase, and the New World Translation has this completely different turn of phrase, which gives a different thought to the scriptural passage. But yet that's exactly what witnesses have always done in their culture. They nitpick. So they can't say, you know what, if you believe in Christ, you're a Christian, and therefore, even though we have some differences, they could still acknowledge that you're a Christian. They have to qualify it. So they talk about something called, you are either a true Christian or a false Christian. And guess who the true Christians are? The true Christians are people who've come to the same conclusion as Jehovah's Witnesses, that you have to call God by the name Jehovah, that you cannot believe that a cross was involved at the death of Christ, that you have to believe in this concept of a faithful and discreet slave, as if Jesus would need slaves. The King of Eternity needs 144,000 slaves, huh? Okay. Anyway, so the idea here is that when I've gone to some of these witnessing carts as I go about my day through my community, or as I travel for work in different airports and I engage different witnesses, I'm just interested in hearing from their own mouth a little bit more insight into not only what they believe, because I have a pretty good grounding in what they believe, you know, being a former pioneer and ministerial servant and book study conductor myself. But why do they believe it is really the question that I like to try to get to. So for an example, those of you that have watched some of my videos have seen that I've had conversations with witnesses about, why do you believe so strongly in that specific pronunciation of the name Jehovah? Because yes, it is widely accepted, particularly among witnesses. But there was a fantastic video that I watched from Susan Gaskin last year. And she talked about this topic, about the pronunciation. And she said, you know, one of the points she made, and Susan, if I'm butchering this paraphrase, please forgive me. But one of the things she said is, what if your name was Bob, and the original pronunciation of Bob got lost? And now somebody starts saying that, you know what, the name of this person is actually pronounced Boob. So therefore, everybody is going to pronounce the name as Boob forevermore. Well, what if you were Bob, and people all over the earth were now mispronouncing your name? There's a completely different connotation if people were calling you Boob than if they were calling you Bob. And so we get into some pretty dangerous ground if we start being dogmatic about, you have to pronounce the name of God in the following way. And the message that you take to the outside world about the good news has to have this brand of Jehovah. So that's one of the reasons why I had that conversation with those cart witnesses, is to just understand that the scriptures that they always use to talk about the importance of using God's name, that there might be a different way to take a look at those scriptures. And so that was my reason for having that conversation at the cart with those witnesses. There was another video that I made with another group of witnesses at another cart, talking a little bit about the cross and the dogmatic stance that was taken in Watchtower Publications, saying that only false Christians use the cross because the cross is an idol. And when I look at the comments and when I talk to other people on the topic of that video, I noticed that a lot of them are saying the same thing, that my point was that that JW.org symbol is no different of an idol than the cross might be. So, for more thoughts on that particular topic, you could go elsewhere on my channel and take a look at that video. But again, my reason for engaging these witnesses is not to enter into a debate. It's not to have the zero-sum game aspect of, in order for me to be right, everybody else has to be wrong. If they want to believe any of that, they're certainly free to do it. I think where I draw the line, though, is that if they want to believe those things, that's fine. But for them to go out and say, anybody who doesn't agree with me, they don't really have a true faith. They're not actually Christians. They're false Christians. That's where I kind of have to draw the line there. Because if somebody has the same fundamental belief system as you, if somebody is a Christian, for example, they could do some things a little bit differently than you do. It doesn't mean that they're false. Just because they don't go to the Kingdom Hall doesn't mean that their belief is false. And you know what? There's an example in the Bible of that too. In the book of Mark, I believe it's Mark chapter 9, somewhere around Mark 9, 38, 39, something like that. There's a story where the apostles were with Jesus in the account. And they said, "Lord, we saw a man expelling demons in your name. And we tried to stop him because he's not with us." Now, Jesus didn't say, "Well, good and faithful slave, thank you for finding out that there was somebody who wasn't doing something according to, our particular group. Run out there and stop him because he's not a true Christian. He's not a true follower." Jesus did not say that. In the account, Jesus said, "Do not stop him because he's doing a powerful work on the basis of my name." So he still believed in Christ. He was still using Jesus' name to perform powerful works. And Jesus went on to lay down in that account, he laid down a principle, and that principle was, anybody who's not against us is with us. For anybody on the basis of my name gives you something as simple as a cup of water, be assured that they will have their reward in full. So there's a lot of people who I've come in contact with that are spiritual people, that are even religious people. And they believe very strongly in whatever faith that they hold to. But they don't cast aspersions on people of other faiths, whereas witnesses do. Because in order for them to be right, everybody else absolutely has to be wrong. So they can look at somebody who is calling themselves a fellow worker in Christ. They can look at somebody who is a fellow Christian, and they look down their nose at him because they say, "Well, you're not really a Christian because you don't use the name Jehovah, and you're wearing a cross, and you're not going to the Kingdom Hall, and you're not being fed by the faithful and discreet slave," etc., etc. So therefore, they say they look at that person who claims to be a Christian, and they feel this poor, pitiable soul is deluding themselves into thinking that they actually have Christ's favor, when the only group in the entire world that has Christ's favor is the Jehovah's Witnesses. So that's the culture that a witness is brought up in. That's a culture that's reinforced every single time you go to the meeting, every single time that the term "the truth" is being used. It's just seeding that false doctrine deeper and deeper. So those are just some thoughts that I had. I don't see it as a crusade on my part to go out and change the thinking forcibly of anybody that I talk to. I just know that I've grown as a person by considering the perspectives of other people. Some of those perspectives I found that I agree with. Others of those perspectives I've chosen to disregard. But moving forward, I'm not just going to arbitrarily accept something and just be told, well, accept it because we say it's true. So last week, for an example, I happened to be on Google, and just for giggles, I Googled the term, what is the identity of Babylon the Great? And all kinds of results came back. I really have no idea why I chose that particular topic to put into a Google search. But it's interesting, everybody who has an opinion on that, who's ever posted anything online about what is the identity of Babylon the Great, they all use Bible verses to back up their opinion. Now, those of you that are ex-witnesses or current witnesses know full well that the identity of Babylon the Great that the Watchtower gives is the world empire of false religion. You were probably saying that as I was saying that. But that's not the interpretation that is, again, widely accepted. There's all kinds of views about that prophetic puzzle piece. Some people have felt, some scholars have felt that it was Rome was being identified as Babylon the Great. Other people feel that it was the Roman Catholicism and the Catholic Church is the true identity of Babylon the Great. Other people with a little bit more of a contemporary vibe feel that Babylon the Great is a modern city. And again, a city, not an entity. So a city like, for example, New York City or London. Other people have interpreted based on current world events that the identity of Babylon the Great is actually the United States of America. So when you look to these different opinions about who is Babylon the Great, you'll notice all of these explanations tie in scriptures throughout the Bible. Scriptures from Daniel and from Revelation and from Ezekiel and from Jeremiah, all to help fit together this puzzle piece. So if you're a witness, why would you prefer the explanation given by the Watchtower? Because all of those opinions are Bible-based, because all those arguments made were based on somebody's interpretation of the Bible. So for an example, when the Watchtower is trying to give validity to a position that they've taken, one of the things that they will very often do is they will look for a quote from a respected scholar or linguist or historian to try to back up their point, to say, see, here's somebody with all these credentials that has come to the same conclusion that we've come to in this publication. And they use that as a proof source. Okay, so if that's true, if what the Watchtower puts out has a quote from a respected member of the scholarly community, why is it that you can never look at a Watchtower article and see what is the proof source of the person who compiled these thoughts? Who is the individual? Who is the person? Who is the committee of people who came up with this thought for our consideration? And they always hide behind this idea of, well, we're not trying to give any undue glory to ourselves. Okay. But the thing is, there's a reason that they want to hide their identity. Because what they believe today as being true is not going to hold true 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, or 40 years from now. And trust me, 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years from now, they're still going to be saying Armageddon is right around the corner. They're still going to have some version of this generation prophecy. So time is always been the enemy of the teachings of the Watchtower. And so who would actually want to put their name on something like that? So I understand why the people who wrote it don't want to have their names known. But for a different reason, you know, if somebody's putting forth an argument for your consideration based on the Bible and based on history and based on the original Greek language, wouldn't you feel a little bit more comfortable in that position if that person had some bona fides to prove that they knew what in the world they were talking about? So if I put together something talking about, let's say, ancient Greek, Koine Greek, well, I'm not trained in Koine Greek, so I could put all these different things together as far as an argument is concerned. But if you look up Curtis's bona fides and you see, well, Curtis has never had any training in that language, Curtis doesn't hold a degree to indicate that he studied any of these things, you know, my opinion is just as valid as anybody else's. So whether that person is a truck mechanic or a mailman or a window washer or whatever, my opinion has just as much weight as theirs. Now, somebody could say, well, listen, I studied ancient Greek at the feet of some of the most respected, you know, professors and historians and linguists. Okay, so that's a little bit of a different situation. And you're never going to see that authorship attributed anywhere in a Watchtower publication. And I know I've kind of rambled on here, but that's kind of the idea of this hike that we're going on out in the desert this morning. I just wanted to free associate a little bit, kind of help me clear my mind, kind of give you an idea about some of the topics that I've been thinking about, give you some glimpse into why do I have my channel in the first place, what's my goal, what's my end game for going up and talking to a witness at the witnessing cart, or talking about this topic or that topic. It's just part of my own personal process. And being an avid YouTube watcher, I've really enjoyed just so many channels. And there are so many channels out there that are each providing their own unique take and perspective, and people are sharing their own story, and I think that's an amazing thing. And I would encourage those of you who have not come out with a YouTube video yourself, don't think that you have to come out with 50 or 100 or 1,000 videos in order to be a YouTuber. All you have to do is take your camera like I'm doing right now and just share a thought or two. Now, you're going to find that there's a lot of people who've been through the same experience that you've had. And I've met some amazing people as a result of putting these videos out. I've made some friends and some people that I really value very much, both for their insights and for their friendship. So if you take the time, even though it might be scary, to you know, put your phone on video, to sit down in front of a camera and just share your own story, and just reach out and add your voice to the growing chorus of voices that are out there, good things are going to come from it. Now, if you're afraid that if I do that, I'm going to maybe get some ugly comments, because I've seen ugly comments on the posts of some YouTube channels, yeah, that's going to happen too, but that's okay, because some of the ugliest comments that have come, I actually had one commenter that had some nastiest comments that I've ever read on my posts, and then several months later they indicate, you know what, please accept my apologies, because I was still indoctrinated when I made those comments. I can see things clearer now, and I hope you'll forgive me. And of course I do. So I'm not saying that every ugly comment that you get means that that person is in the process of waking up, but it definitely does happen. So again, if you are a witness, you probably long since tuned out. If you're a former witness and you're considering making videos, I would strongly encourage you to just do it. Just put the first one out there, leave it up for a month, and see what happens. If a month later you feel that you regret your decision to make a video, you can always take it down. But I feel pretty confidently that if you make a video and just tell your story and leave it up, good things are going to happen. You're going to grow as a person, because it's either going to validate what you chose to share, and you're going to see that other people feel the same thing as you do, or somebody's going to point out something that you maybe never thought of before that's going to have you reconsider your position, either one of which is a good thing. So just do it. And for those of you that have been watching my my videos for a while, just want to give you a little insight as to what's been going on in my family, in my household, for the last month or so. And thank all of you for your support and your comments, and those of you that were aware of the situation that my family's been dealing with recently. Again, thank you so much for your support and words of encouragement. It means a lot. Everybody's doing much better now. The family's doing pretty well. Hopefully we're going to have a very quiet and boring November, but as the year of 2017 winds down, I hope that you and all those that are dear to you have a very peaceful season coming up, And I look forward to the next time we get a chance to spend any time together on my video. So, until next time, this is Sundance 88 from the Sonoran Desert in Tucson, Arizona. Hoping everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for your viewership and your friendship. Have a blessed day.
I'm free.